Peter, the floor is all yours, sir.
Well, thank you so much. My name is Peter, recovered alcoholic, and grateful to be alive and sober and part of a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. And thanks for having me out here. And I hope I get this format down properly. If I don't, just bump me off or something. So I'll do my best to see what God has. Um, Loving God separated me from alcohol June 23rd, 1988. I'm very grateful for this gift of sobriety and very grateful for the many things this loving God has not only given me, but removed from me. Seems the longer I'm sober, the older I'm getting, my point of view has shifted on many things. And I get especially grateful for the things God has removed from me. And those are the things that I thought I needed to be happy. The external things I thought I needed to be happy, namely money, property, and prestige. When I achieve those things, I'll be okay. And I've had a taste of some of those things, and nothing changed. I just pushed me into a higher tax bracket with all my bedevilment. So it's really about getting food for the soul and getting awakened in the soul. I do have a home group. It's Alcoholics and God in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I do have a sponsor currently. It's Bob Bazan out of St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm currently sponsoring. I know because I did the count the other day, 14 men, and they all know I'm their sponsor. So that's a good thing. And if you're around here a while, you'll get that joke. So I'm grateful, quite frankly, to be a member of good standing in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can tell you, I can't fathom life without AA. And if you're new, this is going to sound terribly lame. I don't have a life. It belongs to God and Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, Scripture says something like, if I try to find my life, I will lose it. If I lose it for his sake, I will find it. And it was taken away from me, quite frankly, through my drinking and taking non conference approved dry goods. And it all ended on June 23rd, 1988. And where I've been sitting for a while, I've shared this from a million podiums, but point of view changes. I'm very grateful that God, over time, through the 12 steps and experiencing the death of self and starving the ego and feeding the soul, um, he kind of closes the ears to the mind and open up the ears to the soul for so long, and it can happen even currently. We can see through the mind and speak through the mind and hear through the mind and operate out of that place and hold on to reputation that I think I deserve. And what God does is kind of shift the whole thing around where we start to operate from the soul. And the soul is always right. It knows where to go, what to do, and how to be. And it's an interesting thing about acquiring some faith. It brings a debt to needing to understand and have evidence and documentation. There's something that says we walk by faith, not by sight. And all these things have come to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very grateful for that. I do have a life of prayer meditation, an active 10 and 11 in my life, awakening and retiring at night, and an active 10 and 11 on writing daily inventory. God Almighty, I've been through the steps many, many times. I was a guy who came into Alcoholics Anonymous in 1988, got a sponsor, and under that tutelage, I believe you went through the steps one time and one time only. And around 8 years into recovery, I hit that wall. I was starting to flatline, working with all the mechanics, but something was not firing right. And I found a new sponsor out of Texas. And this gentleman, Mark, began to take me through the steps once a year, and everything changed for me. What I thought was true until I discovered a new truth and I started to wake up. Little by little, you have a new experience um, with God. What I found is, I got into an early recovery worshiping the things that take me to God rather than the God that the things were pointing to. And I started to worship mechanics and seeking information. And all of that was fine. But there comes a point when I need to have a transformation, a revolution, this personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. Other than that, I'm a walking encyclopedia about Alcoholics Anonymous. That gets old quick. What do these mechanics look like live? When adversity hits or when good times come down the pike, what am I doing with that? Who am I giving thanks to? Who am I helping? Who am I sharing? Who am I charitable with? Which removes the need to be self important when I'm in a place of being charitable. I get out of the way. And a lot of the lessons I've learned via the 12 steps, our sacred fellowship, and working with others is about what does this stuff look like live? I was one of those mechanics. I still love mechanics. I like writing inventory, love studying and listening. But what has become more important to me is about getting my soul food. Um, Chopping wood and carrying water. And what does this look like going live? In June of '88, my separation from alcohol was not a good day, like many of us. It wasn't a day where I decided to quit drinking, decided to reach out for help. I didn't see it coming. And like most days today, I can't see God about to change my life. He just shows up and things begin to change. It's the same way. Conversely, I can't see my illness and my ism starting to show up on most days. They just show up and people are affected by that. But what happened to me in June of '88, June 23rd to be specific, I was at this point had been through six treatment centers and was about to head into number seven, and I didn't know it. But my life was reduced to living in an abandoned building in Lower Manhattan, Alphabet City, and in the back of a hallway. And I was quite frankly, a Bowery bum. I mean, I'm not exaggerating or embellishing. That's where I was at. And being homeless for a long time and not bathing and not eating properly and not changing your clothes, I looked the part. And that year, when I checked into, through really divine intervention, got into my seventh treatment center, guys, I was weighed a buck 30 and I'm over 200. I'm about 205 pounds now. So that's a lot less and was urinating blood, had hepatitis C, and was dying of alcoholism. As far as hope, quite frankly, there wasn't any until this moment in the back of a hallway. And what I've learned and experienced about God and hearing countless stories from many others, God doesn't need some decorative palace to show his presence. He'll come into usually the worst spot, whether it's Park Avenue or Park Bench. For me, it was like the Bowery Park Bench, and show his divine grace and mercy and power in those places where many people won't go and cut right through all the noise. What God has done for me over and over and over again, starting with that particular day, He will create an environment. And if you've been around here a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He will create an environment, not necessarily a punitive one, but to create an environment to get my attention. Whether it's through, money or no money or triumphs or losses, he will orchestrate that to get my attention because things have gotten in the way of me and him. And the way the Lord giveth, the God will remove as well, because I am that important to him. And what the steps have afforded me is, for the most part, not perfect. I do none of this perfect. No one works the steps perfect. Is remove a lot of those obstacles in my ideas and delusions about life to get me, if you will, more awakened to him. When I was new, I would do what my sponsor did and the elder statesman would do. I would repeat it and I believed it. And I would say things like sobriety is my number one priority. And I would say that often at a meeting. It also sounded good. I kind of got like my AA sergeant stripes when I said that. I was part of the crew. I'm like those old timers. Sobriety is my number one priority and raise that flag up high. But the truth is true until we discover a new truth. And I will tell you that sobriety is obviously a priority to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on here. I'd be sitting by the pool or something, and I wouldn't be doing all the things I get to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. So it is a priority, but it's not my number one priority anymore. My number one priority for me has been having conscious contact with God. That's my number one priority, being awake to God, taking God into all I do, or trying to at least. See, I can attend all the workshops and seminars about the big book and the steps and the traditions and the concepts, and I can slowly, little by slowly, worship that stuff rather than God. I know because I'm guilty of that in early recovery. I forgot that the big book was a treasure map, not the treasure. And it was a path to take me to this power. So having conscious contact with God, you know what? When I got to do some chopping wood and carrying water to do that, there's some heavy lifting on my part, if you will. But God gives me the endurance and the passion and the stamina, the willingness to do it. Um, when I'm awake to God, I'm traveling light. That doesn't mean life doesn't show up and bite me in the butt once in a while and gets its hands around me, because it does. I'm human and flawed. I listen to the mind sometimes when I shouldn't, but I get to travel light, a lot lighter than before awakening. And it's really interesting having conscious contact with God. I'm not even thinking about a drink or anything else. I'm not looking to hurt myself or anyone else. What I am looking to do is go with the servant's heart and help people. I'm out of the way. I practice fidelity to God and I experience God's fidelity to me. I'm faithful to the practice and I experience the practice's faithfulness to me. It's a light way to go. It's a narrow gate to which I'm walking through, but my God, I get to travel free. But in 1988, I knew nothing about it. In fact, I walked with a lot of contempt and, quite frankly, hate. I was jealous and envious of people who were successful because I was a bum. I was so jealous and envious. I remember a few years before I went homeless, my kid brother, who was a very left brain, Wall Street kind of guy, I'm on the other side of the scale. Um, he got that big job on Wall Street and was an instant success. And around Christmas time, he came home with this is like 1983, 84, with a $25,000 Christmas bonus from his brokerage firm. That's a nice check to have in 2024. He was elated. My dad was elated. Everyone was elated and celebrated. And I was in the basement seething and hating him for it. That's how I operate left untreated. My own brother. I want what you have, but I don't want to do what you did. And so in 1988, I was wrapped up in this ball of poison. See, my alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle of whiskey, because when I sobered up in 88 and I'm in treatment and get out of treatment, I'm still the same guy. I'm going to meetings, I'm hearing some wonderful phrases like first things first and let go and let God, but it means nothing to me. I don't know how to do that. I'm still estranged, if you will, from this power called God. It was a name. I knew what it represented. I'm a cradle Catholic, love the carpenter, but I don't have anything going on yet. And it's basically me still running my life, and I'm running into me wherever I go. One of the most the rudest awakenings, well, when I get sober, the first person I ran into was me. That was not a good day. And because I was physically sober, it didn't mean I was much better. I can tell you from my own experience, when I'm drunk, I'm pretty predictable when I'm drinking and drunk. What I do is I drink, I can't stop, I get drunk, I pass out or make a fool of myself, then pass out. When I come to, I'll look for you, I'll borrow money off you, no intention of paying you back, to get more alcohol, to do the same thing over again. When I'm sober and left untreated, I'm usually more dangerous. So I need to get right. I need to get soul food. In scripture, it says God will give us an equal measure of faith. I need to use it soberly. I'm not better than anyone or less than anyone. God hands out the same amount to all of us, but I'm inhuman. And faith is only good as the container it's in, and my container leaks. It has holes in it. My job is to cultivate that faith. And back to our sacred big book, it does that for me. It takes all my brokenness and all hope and puts it together and turns out a recovered person, turns out this person who's been spiritually awakened for fun and for free. It blows my mind. If I call up my therapist that, I don't have one now, but when I did, if I called her up at maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting on our answering machine. If I call up a hospital, they want to know what kind of insurance policy I have. But if I call up a drunk at midnight, say I'm jammed up, they're taking my phone call and they're going to come get me and they're going to bring a couple of drunks with them. That's Alcoholics Anonymous, the sacredness of it, God's hands and feet. So in that hallway, I didn't know what to do. I despised God back then. I was never an atheist, but I hated God and I blamed God for for all the calamity in the world, especially my own. If he's so loving, why am I a bum living in an abandoned building? Why did he take my mom when I was 14 years old via suicide? Why did he let that man molest me? Why did he give me a gangster for a dad and all the stuff? But something changed on June 23rd, 1988, where it felt like the fist of Gulliver reached down into my soul and pulled out all the poison. Because the very same God I had mocked, despised, and spat out was the very same God I turned to and begged for mercy. And on that day, quite frankly, I got surrendered. I didn't have the ability or the know-how to surrender. I didn't know that I wasn't capable of it. And the desperation he gave me on that day was my first conscious contact with God. It was called the gift of desperation. It beat me, as our book says, into a state of reasonableness. I'm listening to anyone who can help me. And my exact words are, please take me from this. I don't want to die. That's a long way from picking up a drink at 14 years old, and it's euphoric, it's blissful, it's incredible, and I never want to be sober again. And the quick decline into drinking. As long as I was awake, I'm drinking. If I wasn't locked up or in a treatment center, I was drunk. Taking me to addicted to non-conference approved dry goods, narcotics, abscesses on my arms. I mean, things like that. That was not the plan, but here I was. Please take me from this. I don't want to die. In my words to God, I was not thinking about AA or treatment or anything like that. I don't know what to do. Live life forward and understand it backwards. I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful that it's okay. I need to go to detox and treatment and go to AA, get a sponsor, do the steps, and by Monday be Moses. That was not in the cards. It was just, I don't know what to do. And through divine intervention, my dad, who I hadn't seen for really a while, uh, came looking for me. He was in Atlantic City, New Jersey. I'm on the Lower East Side. He's awakened at around 2 or 2:30 in the morning and has a feeling, as he described in his gut, to go find me. His wife thought a lunacy commission should be appointed for him. He said, I don't know where I'm going to look. I just need to go find my son. And he found me later that day standing on a street corner, tore up from the floor up, as we used to call it. He got out of the car, called my name, and I collapsed in his arms, and he held me up and said, I'm not going to lose my son to this over and over and over again. Growing up, I was a kid who was gifted with a talent. It was music. I was the kid in my neighborhood who was going to make it out via music. Everyone knew it, that there's something special about this kid. I knew there was something I can do, just I can do. I don't know how I did it. I was a drummer. I could play lots of other instruments. It's just, I had a feel for it. But alcoholism destroyed all of that. I was a really good student. I was a good little athlete. I was the kid you didn't have to worry about growing up from outward appearances. But if you peeked inside of me, it was a war zone all up in here. No matter where I went, there I was, and fear owned me, that evil and corroding thread. And sometimes in recovery, I may not even know I'm in fear, but I'm experiencing the effects of it. That's why today it's so important for me that the freedom I seek is not for me, but from me. Because left untreated, I don't feel like I'm a part of God. I feel like I'm apart from God. That's a bad place to be, being isolated and alone in a room full of Alcoholics Anonymous people. That's a terrible place to be. I go to AA and I feel alone. I go home and I feel alone. I put my head on a pillow and I feel alone because I'm consumed with me again. That's alcoholism. It gets a life by taking mine. That's what it does. I'll die from alcoholism without ever putting a drink in me if I'm not careful. And so my dad put me in my 7 treatment center, and I was in there about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. I don't recall, but I got thirsty again. The detox was horrific. And a book talks about the bitter morass of self pity. Oh my God, it was coming in waves, and the remorse and guilt of the damage I did, and how am I going to get out? All my friends that I used to have are probably by now married with kids and have careers, and I'm 28 years old and I need a committee to tie my shoelaces. I don't know anything, but by God's grace, I didn't leave treatment. They sent me out to Minnesota. And I lived out there for a year. I went to treatment and halfway and three quarter and sober living. I always thought that stuff was for criminals, and it's for alcoholics and addicts too. And there I am living there. I'm learning how to live, learn how to cook for myself and clean my own clothes. And I was taken to a meeting called the Three Legacies meeting in Minneapolis. And, we have those moments, those little God wink moments that they may be fleeting, but they change our life. Someone says something or you see something that will forever change. And that meeting did that every Friday night. And there was one particular gentleman. I remember standing against in the back of the room against the wall. I was too embarrassed to sit anywhere in the front or the middle. By now, I was wearing, my brother had sent me his clothes, and they were way too small on me. And the sneakers he sent me were too small. And I had those old members only jackets with the windbreaker. And it's like 100 billion below zero in Minnesota at this point. And, everyone's dressed properly, and I show up like this. So I'm against the back of the wall, and God, I wanted what you guys had to offer. And the speaker got up there that night, and I'll never forget, he looked like Sigmund Freud. He was an old guy, probably my age now, but to me at the time, he was a dinosaur. And I says, oh my God, what is it? Sigmund Freud's about to speak to. What is he going to say that I'm going to identify with? And I had a little contempt going on. We often say in AA, that person told my story and gender doesn't matter. This guy told a story that I'll never forget. He had a dad like mine, a mom like mine, and the same type of feeling growing up. He was very educated, white collar guy, so that was different. But all of it was the same, and he talked about that inadequacy and insecurity, and just how a drink fixed all of that. He had me. I never saw him again. I didn't know to go up to the front and thank the speakers back then. I didn't know to do that, and I left. It's 36 plus years later, and that guy is still in my head about what he said that night. Polly Pistol, who sponsors my wife, is another one. I was given a cassette tape by her, and I basically played it until there was nothing left of it because she kept talking to my soul. And that's what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. When someone is speaking at your home group, perhaps, and we do that AA nod thing we do when somebody said something, yeah, that's not a conclusion of the mind. That's the soul acknowledging what it always knew. It's familiar music. That's why there's that reaction to it. Yes, that's truth. And so a year later, I was brought home from Minnesota. I was invited back home, and my family was still walking on eggshells around me. They didn't know what to expect. And I went to live with my kid brother. I was sleeping on his couch and hoping to get a job and my old job back, maybe, which I completely lost and blew my union membership and all of that. And I was going to meetings and I found a sponsor. I remember one Sunday night, it was kind of a dank, rainy, just a nasty New York night. And I was in Brooklyn, New York. Um, and I was living with my kid brother, and I was doing 2 days. I went to a morning meeting, and there was a 7 o'clock meeting at the same church that the morning meeting had, which meant I had to wait on the street corner in the rain, wait for the bus, get to the meeting, and like that. And my brother, who's a gym rat, turned the corner and he's walking, and it's this heavy drizzle and it's freezing out. And he sees me standing on a street corner, and he turned white as a ghost. And he says, "What are you doing?" This is a year later. I was in Minnesota for a year, but he still was in pain and remembering how I used to be. And I said to him, "I'm going to St. Mary's Church. There's a meeting there. I'll pick up pizza on the way home and we'll hang out." And he says, "Okay." He must have held his breath for 2 hours, because around 8:30 or whatever the heck it was, when I walked in with pizza, I can see the color go back in his face again. He was telling the truth. And it's like that. I could have pontificated lines from the big book to him. It meant nothing. The sermon was the walk. Yeah. The sermon was the walk. And I got the instructions in the big book from a sponsor on how to do that. The death of self for daily, for successful living. And I eventually got a job back, and my dad and I began to bond, especially after the ninth step. I remember sitting with my old man with an envelope full of money. I owed him so much money. And I sat with him and began the approach. And he stopped me 2 sentences into it. And he says, "All I ever wanted was my son back." And this tough guy from South Brooklyn began to praise you folks. And he told me, "Whatever they're telling you to do, continue to do." Now, my old man would not let anyone interfere with raising his boys. I remember sitting in treatment on Family Week, and counselors would tell him what they should do with me. And in a nice, respectful way, he told them where they can stuff their information. No one was getting in until he saw what you were doing to me. And he said, "You do what those folks are doing." He basically turned me over to you because he believed it. His eyes couldn't deny what he was seeing. That's the sacredness of Alcoholics Anonymous, for fun and for free. And we began to bond. Um, in order for me to operate out there, to see clearly out there, to hear clearly out there, I first need to touch the power in here before I do anything, having conscious contact with God. And I start to show up and suit up like they told me in Alcoholics Anonymous. If there was a Christmas dinner at someone's house at 8 o'clock, I got there 8 o'clock, and I stayed late to help out, to clean up. And I got my job back, and my sponsors, "You're going to do what you do in AA, get there early and leave late. That's what you're going to do for work." And I would get to work early and stay late. And I stopped making like drive-by amends. I owed a lot of people money. And so I would get paid, take money out of my check, and look for Joe and Frank and Bill and say, "Hey, I need to make amends to you." And I was going there change, which is part of the amends. I wasn't still the drunken bum I was. And I never showed up to an amends looking like I was going to commit a felony soon as I was done with it. I had to be proper for that. Now, what the steps have done as I start to, little by slowly put the past to bed. I mean, how could I live now knowing how I lived then? I don't want to be operating out of the past voices. I don't want that guy showing up anymore. So as I start to clean up amends, things started to change for me. And prayer and meditation took on a whole different level for me, and more, and the importance of having a prayer life and a life of meditation was incredibly important for me. I didn't want to cause any more damage any longer. And showing up for my family, my brothers wound up getting into Al-Anon therapy in church, and my dad, who was this tough guy, the last few years of his life began to talk freely about this power called God, because he saw what God was doing to me. So one of the things that come out of prayer and meditation is my awareness. Again, I don't do any of this perfect, as to, what am I in denial about? Where am I hurting that I'm not paying attention to? Where am I resting on my laurels that I shouldn't be? Where am I cutting corners and just, "I'll get to it tomorrow"? And I say tomorrow, 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 and then tomorrow's today, and it's too late. To have a sponsor that I'm accountable to, my wife who I'm accountable to. we're transparent with each other. It's really important that both of us that we get time to pray together and flush out stuff that might be in the way and be transparent with each other. My prayer life and meditation life has changed a whole bunch since I first got in here. When I first learned to meditate, they put me on a timer for 2 minutes. It felt like 20 years of, hard labor in prison. 2 minutes of meditation, please, that's way too much. We're getting drastic. And, but I learned how to work with meditation and prayer. And God has, when the ground was fertile, has given me, if you will, answers to my riddles. Knowing that I'm known by my creator has come out of that. And so I think I honor God by talking about him rather than going silent on him because it may not be popular. In fact, when I stop talking about what I believe in, I stop believing in it. So it's my job to talk about that in the sacred rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Quite frankly, shout the solution from the rooftop. Whether it's I'm coming from the big book or giving you God experiences, I need to shout that from the rooftop how God has revolutionized and changed not only my life but countless others. I'm not going to hide that in the closet. I'm not going to hide the big book in the closet. I'm not going to hide God in the closet. In the world out there right now, God's a four-letter word. That's their problem, not mine. So I rather bear the pain of waiting for God than bear the pain of going on without. So I do what I do, and I plow the field, and God does the growing. Um, it's really interesting how I fell in love with the effect produced by alcohol when I first started drinking. It was the panacea for everything. Um, I didn't think of my mom's passing. My mom was alcoholic, a narcotic user, took her own life. When I was drunk, that was not on the horizon. The fear I've had of growing up around my dad, very intimidating guy. My dad, you know the movie Goodfellas, you know that Robert De Niro guy? That was my old man. And I wanted to be a hippie. I wanted to go to Woodstock when I was 10 years old. I wanted bell bottoms and hippie beads and long hair. And my dad was sure he picked up the wrong baby at the hospital. So we bumped heads. Um, I drank alcohol. That was resolved. I was very, very what's the word? Shy, introverted, and to talk to a pretty girl. Oh my God, how do you? I don't even know where to start. Other guys just kind of they did it. They were just smooth that way. How do I go talk to that really pretty little girl? Something happened when I drink alcohol. Suddenly I'm like Elvis Presley. I don't know what happens to me. I'm like Snoop Dogg and Dirty Harry rolled into one. I mean, it's just I become a player. And they probably said, "Who's this knucklehead?" But I really thought I was cool. So it worked, but I didn't know it was not going to work anymore. And basically, as the book says, cut me to ribbons. It became my master, King Alcohol. I worshiped it. I did what it said to do on time. And then I got addicted to outside issues. That only, I had the trifecta going on booze, pill, and narcotics. I had no life. I counted money by what I can buy. And with every waking moment, I'm plotting and scheming on how to get money to keep this drunk going because when I'm not drinking, my body's starting to vibrate. And then I walk into Alcoholics Anonymous and I could talk about all the blessings you guys and God have given me, as I already touched on already. My dad passed, I just have a few minutes here. My dad passed a year ago, July 29th. And I lost a hero, I lost a friend. He had a lot of flaws, a lot of faults, but I got to see my dad, thank you, God in AA, as a man with flaws and faults like me. And that opened up a deeper channel for communication with he and I. And when he met my wife, he fell in love with her. He thought she was the greatest thing. And we had this wonderful thing. And I lost him. And I felt like someone punched me right in the belly. I knew it was going to happen. He was very sick, but when it happens, it happens. And it's like, oh boy. And my sponsor says, your job is to be there for your wife and your brothers and the rest of your family. And you will weep and you will get aggravated and you will go through that. But right now, that's what you're going to do. And I did. And God gave me enough to keep my head up and shoulders square. And when I finally broke down, my wife scooped me up. And the AAs circled the wagons. And even the new guys in my home group, because they're a little intimidated about, they got like maybe 90 days and I got 36 years. So they think somewhere in AA there's a statue of me somewhere, when you look at the old timers like that. And they sheepishly came around and says, "How are you feeling? Sorry about your dad." It meant so much. They were band-aids on me. So I'm forever grateful, so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. I love AA. I love everything about AA. And I'm very grateful that God's mercy keeps a watch over Alcoholics Anonymous, along with his love and power. I think it's God's mercy that keeps our doors open, the lights on, the coffee that's going. So I'm very grateful that you guys have had me here. That's all I got. Peace.
Peter, that was fantastic.